All right. Hello. So we're going to be doing some mock interviews today. Let me change something really quickly. Our program changes the category incorrectly, so I need to set like software dev, web dev, programming, engineering, all that good stuff. So let me set the tags really quick. There we go. Awesome. All right. So yeah, welcome. We're going to be doing some mock interviewing today, particularly with JavaScript. So today we are joined by Derick Moncado. And Derick, do you want to say hello?
Yes, sir. I'm not muted, am I?
No, you're up now.
Awesome. Yeah, so I'm Derick, front-end developer. I actually come primarily from a background in design, but over the past years or so, transitioned more to like the code side of things, obviously web development. And for the past year or so, right prior to the pandemic starting, I made the decision to take programming a little more seriously in JavaScript and learn Angular and React. So that's kind of where I'm at. Not the most experienced guy, but I'm here to give it my best shot and hopefully learn some stuff. So let's do it.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, that's kind of why we do mock interviews, right? To prepare ourselves a little bit better and to learn new things. So don't feel like, oh, well, I don't want to admit that I don't know something. This is an open forum. Please feel free to, let me know if you get stuck or anything like that. Part of the mock interview is not just to be better interviewing, but to hopefully learn something coding wise as well. So let me do this really quickly. We're live. Come join us on Twitch. All right, doing all the social media stuff really quick.
Plug it.
All right, good stuff. So yeah, let's see where we go. So let me share my screen. Share screen. There we go. Awesome. So you should be able to see the code editor window. Derick, I think I've sent you this link. Are you able to see everything okay?
Got it, yeah.
Super cool. So usually we recommend for junior developers to have the ability to do take-homes. We think it's much more representative of like how you're able to work in a code base. And more so, it's a lot less stressful, I feel, a lot of the times. That said, it's kind of difficult to turn a take-home into live streams. So we're here and we can pretend that this is a take-home, just an assisted one from the interviewer, which is a little abnormal, but no worries. So we're going to be taking a look at a few questions. We did take a look at these questions last week, but the reason why we're recovering them, one, I don't think Derick has spent too much time testing against these questions. And two, I want to make sure that we have the different perspectives of like a senior developer approaching these questions and a junior developer approaching these questions. So I think it'll be a good fit. So we can start with one of three questions. We have the question of finding the differences between two arrays. We have the ability to turn a two-dimensional array into a table, like a visual markdown table. Or we have the ability to do a brackets validator. So basically a really, really basic syntax checker. Which one do you think you want to start with, Derick?
Probably the array one.
Okay.
We can start with that, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So let's do this. Bada bing. So the stuff down here, you don't need to worry about modifying. You don't need to change it all. The only thing that's all doing is that these are unit tests. So I know that when we were working together at Cooper, we didn't do too much of that. But the idea is that these tests will allow you to see when the code is functioning as expected. So you'll see that one test is passing because we're returning an empty array and we're checking whether there's an empty array for one of the tests, but two of the tests are failing. So if we take a look at, say, line 22 line 22 through 25, right? You can see that there is the diff set, which is the method that we're going to be writing. And we want to check if we pass in the array of 1, 2, 3, 4, and we pass in a second array of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we expect to see 5 because it's not in both arrays, if that makes sense.
Yes.
We also have the ability to do the same thing for both arrays. So like if we look at lines 31 through 34, if we pass in the array 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, you'll notice that 5 and 6 are in one array, but not both. So we output 5 and 6. So list 1 is the first list. List 2 is the second list. So implement diff here. So we will implement the logic in this diff set function at the very top. So before we like actually start walking through the problem itself, let's try to think through how we're working through this problem. Like brainstorm what you might expect to do and how you might expect to do it.
So out the gate, I would assume probably you need like a higher order array function here, maybe something like reduce or includes, just to like find the difference, something along those lines maybe, and then maybe set a few variables with some numbers. That's just my best guess, like from the jump.
Yeah, and I think that's a good intuition. So includes would be the one that I would think like instinctually would give us some information of what, like, does this array include this?
Yeah.
And so just to add a disclaimer, this problem can get very, very, very complicated. If, like, for example, let's say that we wanted to check whether objects were in here. Now we have to deal with memory addresses and we have to do with decompares, and like this problem can get very, very, very complicated. The problem that we're solving here is very, very specific in that, one, there are numbers, not objects, not arrays, not anything else. We don't have to do a deep compare because that gets very confusing. And two, we will never have two of the same number. So for example, on line 16, this will never happen. We will never have more than one of the same number in the array.
Okay.
Just as an assumption. So don't worry about either of those edge cases. Those tend to come up pretty frequently. So yeah, let's do a very basic version. Let's take a look at the test case for the first and second test case. How would you check whether each item is included in the second item? Like, could you write a for loop that does that for us?
Yeah, I'm also wondering maybe even for each, if that's cleaner.
Yeah, you can do that too.
Okay. Maybe, I don't know if filter would come in handy in any of this also, but that would be my next guess also. Filter
is another implementation we could take. There's a few different ways to take it. So however you want to like think through it or like work on it, start writing the for loop. Let's see where we go.
Okay, no pressure.
No, legitimately no pressure. Don't worry about it. You got this.
I just covered this stuff earlier this week too.
Yeah, no worries. And if you get stuck, please feel free to ask.
So the two cases at the bottom are the ones that aren't passing that we have to solve. So, okay. To return an added item in the same order. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna call it. I'm gonna say I'm not 100% sure. I'm kind of stuck already, so.
No worries. So what we might do, and there's a more optimized way to do this. There's a way that we can do this with one for loop, but just to keep things simpler, let's use filter, right? Filter allows us to be able to get what is in one array that is not in another, right? So we might do something along the lines of if one equals list one dot filter item one.
Yeah, okay.
And then something like so the idea here, I won't write the full thing, is item one in list two, right? Well, let's do that check first. How would we do a check to see if item one is in list two? We could do
return item dot, maybe the numerical value, something like that.
Well, so keep in mind that list two is an array, right? So you had mentioned earlier that we have includes, right? So how would we be able to take list two and check if it contains item one?
It's probably list. Or includes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, list includes, and I think includes. I have some notes actually. It's like just covered all this stuff. Like
no, totally.
Last 3 days.
See, like, so a lot of people think that like it's a bad idea to check notes or Google or whatnot during an interview. And there are some companies that definitely have that stigma, which sucks because, you know, like that's what you're doing in an everyday job. Like I Google like multiple times every day that I'm good doing coding. But if your interview allows you to take advantage of Googling or looking at notes, totally do so. So nothing wrong there. Yeah, perfect. The only thing that's kind of off here is that we don't have a variable called list.
You're correct. Yeah.
So what would we need to change that to?
So the arrays are coming from these tests down there. I mean, can we just grab the array from there, or do we need to set it ourselves as a variable?
No. So they're passed in as parameters, right?
Okay.
So the first array is passed in as parameter called list1, and list2 is defined as the second parameter.
Okay.
Right. So we're checking against list1, and we want to check whether list2 includes the item. So we'd probably modify this to say something like list2.
Oh, got it. Okay. Yeah, because we're comparing the two. Got it.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So keep in mind though, we're missing a return statement because this is a filter. Right. Perfect. So let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. Did it finish already? I think it did. Yeah. This one was too interesting. Oh, you know what? I think. Is this working? List1.filter item 1. If it includes, then okay. I think we might need to invert this.
So if it's not list2.
Yeah. So this works. Okay. So basically what we're doing here, sorry, that was my bad. I kind of misguided. So the idea here is that list2 should not include item 1, right? And that means that these are the items that exist, items in list 1, but not 2. Right? That's a much more descriptive thing, right? So we have one of them, and you'll notice that if we look at the second test case, you'll see that there's we're finding 5, but we're not finding 6, right? Because we're only checking what's in list 1, but not in list 2. So how would we write this such that the items, we do need to modify 2 things here. And actually, hang on, let me make this. So how can we modify the lines of code 7 through 9 to include what we're looking for? So we already know what's in list 1 that's not in list 2. But what is in list 2 that is not in list 1? We'll need to modify something on line 7, and we'll need to modify something on line 8.
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe just the not operator, prepend it with maybe in front of item 2. Here, actually, I don't think that's it, but
not quite. So keep in mind, let's ignore this for now, right? And let's actually think through what is happening through lines 3 through 6, right? What we're saying here is anything in list 1, remove it if, remove everything that does not match this function, right? So we only want to keep items that are true, return true here, right? So if list 2 includes item 1, then we don't want to include it in the list because we only want things that are only in item list 1 and not in list 2, right? So that's why we have the not operator. We're saying if it is not included in list 2, then it is only in list 1, right?
Mm-hmm.
So vice versa here, we need to change this function such that it says everything in list 2 that is not included in list 1. Yep. So that's one thing we need to change.
And return not list 1,
yes,
which includes. Okay.
Yep. Perfect. So now the only thing that's the problem is that we're returning 1 array, but we're not returning 2 arrays.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we combine these 2 arrays together?
I think there's a method for that. I think either is it concat or join?
Yep, concat is right. So join takes multiple items in an array and joins them into a string. But yeah, concat is correct. Okay. So let's go ahead and concat the first list to the second list.
Now, I wonder if with doing that, if destructuring would be beneficial there. Maybe not.
Yeah, so there are two ways to do what we're looking for. There's both concat and there's destructuring. So a concat might look something like this dot concat this, or like you said, destructuring might look something like this.
With the spread operator, okay.
Yeah. So for this case, I don't think that there's. I'd have to check the actual analytics, or not analytics, but benchmarks. But I don't think there's too much of a performance difference between those two. At least not for this use case, for something this small. So whatever you feel more comfortable with, I would recommend going with concat just because it's a little bit more easy to read for something as simple as this.
Okay, I know about concat. I've actually never used it, so I think I just.
So the syntax is concat. Right? So given an array, let's provide the two arrays in there. How would we do that?
It's just in the we're in the function of diff set, so that wouldn't be right. I'd say just grab both of them, just type them out, right?
Yeah, let's do that.
This one, but not list two.
I know it's a long name. It's not a great name, but I wanted to make it as descriptive as possible.
And if we're going to concat, I think concat just, we pass in the one that we want to append to it, I think.
Yep, exactly.
To list two, but not list one.
Perfect.
List one. Okay.
The name is slightly off. It's not list one. It's just not one. Again, my bad. It's kind of confusing.
No worries. So okay, we're going to take the first list and concatenate it with the second. Okay.
So let's assign that to like a variable. We'll
final.
On final, and we'll return final, and let's see how that works. Let's run it. Okay. Item in list two, but not one. Oh, it's items. Super minor. So yeah, there we go. You did it. Okay. So the one thing that I will say here, I don't think that we need to change this for this interview, but for anyone that's like watching the stream or the VOD or anything like that, there is a way to do this. So these filters, right? If you were to rewrite these filters, what you would do is something like this. If this dot includes item, or it would be something like this.
Push it on. Okay.
Yeah. So you'll see that this is basically how we'd rewrite this function, line 12 through 15, right?
Messy.
But then once it's not messy. It's just an older way of doing it. And actually, I need to do that. There we go. So this would be the first way to write that, right? I also misspelled length. And then if we were to do the second array, we would do the same thing, but it would be 2, 2, 2, 1, right? So I agree with you. This does look cleaner, but do you see a problem, or do you see any way that we would be able to make this a little bit more efficient?
From what we wrote?
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of repetition going on. It's a lot of the same thing.
Right. King Cool mentions, I love the older way. Yeah, there are some people that prefer the older way of doing things, and there's a good reason for it, which I'm trying to highlight. So the problem here is exactly what you said. This is repetitious, right? But more than just being repetitious, we're doing a for loop twice.
Yeah.
Right? Which means that it's not a huge deal here, right? These arrays are 6 in length, right? 5 in length.
Yeah.
Not that big a deal. But let's say that we wanted to compare and contrast two arrays that have 18,000 items in each, right? Having 2 for loops iterate through each one is going to be very slow comparatively if we were able to reduce this down to 1 for loop.
Definitely.
Right? And there is a way to do this with only 1 for loop. So that's just something to keep in mind. If you want to go through and like actually do that, we can, or we can move on to the next problem. It's up to you.
I'd say, yeah, I'm not 100% how to implement that, but I'd like to see it. I think that'd be great. Yeah.
So what we could do is the basis of what we're doing here is checking whether an array contains an item from the other array, right? But we're doing this with 2 for loops. So what we could do instead is we could do something along the lines of const includes. Let's rename this diff. So we'll check whether list 1 contains the item. Here, tell you what, we'll make this a little bit easier to read. Item 1 equals list 1 dash I. Const item 2 equals. Oh, that's not correct. Never mind. Okay. So what we can say here is we can say something along the lines of does list 1 include, or does list 2 include the item from list 1, right? And if it does, we can say continue. So basically, are you familiar with what continue does?
I'm not. I've actually never seen it before.
No worries. No worries. Let's take a look. Let's do, hang on. We will return empty array here. And let's do a for loop down here. And commenting all this out so that we can actually see what we're doing. So in a for loop, if we do let I equal 0 and let I less than or equal to 3 and I plus plus, basic for loop, right? And we say if I is less than 2, continue. And we say console.log I. What continue does, you're familiar with like early returns, right?
Early returns. I've actually never heard of that either. So
no worries. I think you've actually ran into it because we had it a fair bit in our like the code base that we worked in together. But the idea is something like this, right? So like let's say we have a function called log, and we want to make sure that I is a number. What we could do, there's 2 ways of doing this. We could say if type of I equals number, do something. Uh-oh, okay, we're reconnected. We could console.log I plus 10, right? And this works. Right. But the problem is, what happens if we want to do if I is greater than or equal to 12, then we console log I, like, there's a way to do this, right? But you'll know 3 curly braces at the end that are making what's kind of like a Christmas tree, right? So instead, what if we rewrote this function to be this, right? So first, we change it to not equal, and we do return. Now, we know that I is a number, but we're returning early, right? So none of the rest of this code will run, but none of the rest of the code ran anyways. So we're able to remove 1 curly brace, right? And then we can do another one where we invert the logic and we do it a return. So this is the concept of an early return. These are 2, like this does exactly the same logic between both of these, right? The only difference is that one of them has 3 curly braces, the other one has 1 curly brace.
Interesting. Okay.
Right. So it's a way of keeping our application logic flat and a bit more concise. So it's easier to follow the logic for the second one versus the first one, in my opinion. So given that, like, let's keep this up, right? We'll comment this out as early return. There's also the concept of a continue, right? So you can think of continue like a return inside of a for loop. So here we're saying if I is less than 2, don't do anything. Don't run anything past this continue, right? And instead move on to the next item, right? So it's kind of like saying, well, the first iteration will be 0, right? And 0 is less than 2, so it'll hit this continue, and it'll go, oh, okay, I'm not going to run console log I. I'm going to start over. Then it'll be 1. 1 is less than 2, so on and so forth, right? So what we would expect to see here is we'd expect to see I am skipping. You know what? Here, let's make this a little bit more readable. Here we go. So we'd expect to see I'm skipping 0, I'm skipping 1, and then done 2. This is what we'd expect to see, right? So let's take a look. Yep, we'll see I'm skipping 0, I'm skipping 1, and then done 2. So continue basically just says, like, if I remove this console log, you'll notice that it doesn't log anything except for that done.
Oh,
but it is iterating through each of these items, right? So it's kind of like a way to embed this concept of like an early return into a for loop and allows you to be more efficient and instead of having like 18 for loops and stuff, right? So keeping that all in mind, let's comment this out. My dog is going crazy. And let me let her outside for just a second.
Yeah, of course.
I'll be right back. Give me just a second. Yeah. All right. Apologies. So now that we understand the continue a little bit here, right, we can say that if both of the items include the item, or both of the lists includes the item, we can continue, right? Because we know that, like, we're familiar with that both of these lists contain this item, right? So here we can say diff.push list 1I, which is the first item, right? So if we run this, oh, right, I commented out our tests. Let me enable those again. So if we run these, you'll see that we're back where we were with just one of the for loops, right? Or one of the for eaches. So we can see that we have 5, but we don't have 6. So how do we do that? We know that the item is in list 1, but not in list 2. What's up, Big College? How you doing? So we have list 2 dot includes list 1. I'm forgetting how we do this. It's if it includes. Oh, I've done this before. I literally did it last stream, and I'm forgetting now. List 1 dot length dot includes. Hang on, let me refer to my notes.
Yeah, of course.
I know that it's something to do with checking whether both of them contain it or not. Hang on. I've got our questions. Oh, here we go. Sorry, solutions. Diff.findIndex. If index equal to 1. Oh, that's right. Okay, yeah. So, okay. So we have the idea that one of the lists includes this, right? But what if instead we started off with, instead of an empty array, we started with the everything that is in list 2, right? So we're starting with everything in list 2, and we can check if something is included. So we'll do find index. So if find index is not -1, then we'll do diff dot splice includes. Basically, what we're saying here is we want to be able to check whether the second array includes the first item, right? So everything is in the second list here. And what we're saying is if that difference includes the item from list 1, then it is in list 2. We can go ahead and remove it. But if it isn't in list 2, then we push it. So eventually what we'll do is we'll iterate this down every single time so that we only have the items in list 2 that are not in list 1, and we push in everything from list 1 that isn't in list 2. So this is a little bit confusing, but if we run the test, 1 is not a function. Well, that's correct. Oh, right. Item. There we go. I had to pass in a function to find the index. It's correct, but it's flipped. So 5 and 6 matches 6 and 5. So the tests are passing. They're just, the tests are wrong, basically, if that makes any sense.
I've seen splice before. I'm not super familiar with it. Do you mind breaking that down a little bit?
Yeah, so splice, I'm sure you're familiar with the difference between mutation and kind of creating a new object entirely. If not,
yeah, mutation is, I think, editing the existing objects or pieces of data on an object. I think it's immutable, right?
Right, exactly. So actually, you know what? Let's put in the names of the indexes here. So we'll do 0, 1, 2, and if we do array.splice, the first index 1 time. So what we're saying here is remove the first index. Starting at the first index, remove 1 item. So now if I did console log array, console out, test that, comment out our tests, just so it's not spamming us too much, we can see 0, 2, right? Because we removed the first index 1 time. If we removed from the first index 2 times, it would be 0.
Oh, it's like the starting point, and then the second parameter is how many. Okay.
So yeah.
Nice.
So that's splice, and this would be the 2 different ways to write the function. There's one with 2 for loops and one with 1 for loop. The one for loop is really tricky. I had to think through this one a few times, so don't worry about that. Your solution was like the way that most. So this is actually a question that I originally looked at Stack Overflow to see how it's done. And like every single solution was doing exactly what you're talking about, or what you did with the 2 for loops. So in fact, I didn't even see an example that used 1 for loop. This was something that I saw it as a challenge, and I'm like, all right, sweet, it'll be fun.
Nice.
So now let's see if we can do let's do the markdown table.
Okay.
This one is a fun one, I think. So let's replace the pad. So we have a fresh start. The idea here is that given an array like the one from 5 to 10, we have the header, which contains two strings, right?
Okay.
So we want to treat these as headers. And then we have all of the body items, right? So apples is the item, count is the count, or 3 is the count, right? Given this, how do we turn it into a markdown table? I'm sure if you haven't used Markdown, it's kind of like a different way of writing text in a syntax so that it's visible in a different way. But how do we turn it into a table like this?
Probably just, we wanted to, so that's the output table.
Mm-hmm.
I was just wondering if we could just, because that's what's going to be printed to the console, I'm assuming.
Right.
Okay, maybe with some template literals, some like string interpolation, some backticks or something.
We could do that.
Probably loop over the array and then inject them somehow. Maybe create an object. I'm not 100%. That's just like my thinking, like right out of the gate.
So you were saying that we could build an object, right?
Yeah.
But what I would propose is let's build a string, right? Because the output is a string. Let's build a string and go from there. So we could have let output equals empty string, right? And then in a loop, we could say, I'll write just a basic for loop. You can change it to a for each or you know, whatever you want to. So given something like this, let's do output plus equals I, right? So the idea here is that if I run this, the test will fail, but that's what we expect. Whoops. You'll see that it outputs the string. Oh, whoops. I'm not returning anything. There we go. So it'll output the string like 1, 2, 3, 4 or 0, 1, 2, right? So we could build a string like this and we could start with something like this, right? So let's start without worrying about this separator, right? So first step, how do we get our output to look like this? Right? So
probably just some concatenation, I guess.
Yeah, we can do concat. Remember, there's also the join operator, which is what you had mentioned before. So there's a few different ways of doing this. So let's first start by changing this for loop. Instead of for a number, let's do every item in the array. Let's do that first.
So for every item in the array.
Right. Because we want to be able to, for every row in the array, I guess I should say.
I mean, would it be I would think a for each?
Yeah, you can do a for each.
It's notes time. It's notes time.
So someone is, really don't like the question that we just got. I'm not going to bother responding to it directly, but what I will, and that's okay. We are doing a junior mock interview right now, and there's nothing wrong with starting off with questions that may not be as advanced as other questions. And it doesn't mean that the developer is lesser or anything of the nature. So strongly discourage taking attacks on anyone. It's not cool. I'm trying to figure out mod view. There we go. All right. So yeah. Okay. So let's change this for loop. So right now we're indexing to 3. Let's take the array length instead, right? Because that's the row within the array. Keep in mind that this is a 2-dimensional array, so it's a little bit confusing. But we can do something like array.length. We can call this const row equals array I, right? You do something like that. So row is an array. We'll actually call this row array. Let's do row array. How would we turn these 2 items into a string that looks like this now that we have the array?
I think, isn't there a method called toString? Or
there is toString, but toString doesn't like. So I'm actually not
strings. So
yeah, well, so you could do an array.toString, but I don't remember what an array.toString would output, and it definitely wouldn't add these pipe and the spaces.
Yeah. Okay.
So it wouldn't quite be what we're looking for. But there is the join operator. If you're not familiar with it, what the join operator will do is, given something like this, it'll output something like this. We'll stringify the array, brackets included. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
So we could do something like this to join. But keep in mind that join only join, like it doesn't include the start and the end. So what we want to do is, let's say we did something like join pipe. We would then have to do something here to be able to make it 1 space 2 space, something like that. So how would we do that? Like, what would we do? Like, let's say that we have let row string equals row array dot join. Let's start with that, right? And if we take a look at the output, we can see right now it's item count apples. So how do we add the extra brace at the end in the start, right? We could do like a plus sign. We could join, like, how do we join a string to another string?
Just the plus operator, or the, actually, I think you have it there on 7. You can just like tack it on. It like just adds to it basically. Yeah.
Yeah. So right now, row string looks something like, this is what it kind of looks like right now. So how do we take row string and add this pipe to each end? So we can use a plus sign.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it would just be like something like that.
Perfect. Okay. So keep in mind, we need one at the start and the end, though. So that's the one at the end. Let's add one to the start.
Do we probably need a space also? Yeah,
probably. So keep in mind, we don't want to add it to output. We want to add it to row string. Well, we do want to add it to output, but we want to go after the.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Got it. So something probably like that, which looks a little funky, but I think that'll work. Actually, we need. There.
Yep, perfect. The other thing that I'll mention is that we don't have spaces around these right now, right? So we probably want to do something like that, because it matches closer to what we're doing down here.
This is the starting and ending pipe.
Exactly, and then these are the ones in between each of them. That's
I see. I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yep. So now if we run this, cool. We're seeing a start here, right? So we have 1 row, we have 2 rows, right? But the problem here is that there's no new line to separate between these. Are you familiar with how to add a new line using the plus sign? If not, no worries. This is more of an encoding thing.
I swear I've seen it before.
No
just in like basic Code Academy courses, but
what we do is we'll have something like this, right?
A break with the backslash.
So the backslash n means enter a new line, right? So yeah, if we run that, we're like 90% of the way there, right? We have the count, we have the apples, we have all this stuff, right? The only thing that we're missing now, because we did the first half. In fact, if I make the test equal the output table too, we're passing the test.
So sorry, can you reiterate that last part again?
So the table 2, right, which is right here, we've matched this, but we're missing something, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to make it match this table right here, which is more markdown oriented.
Got it. Okay. So
how do we add? So we need to add this after row 0. How do we add something for 1 row inside of this for loop?
I'm drawing a complete blank.
No worries. So we know which row index we have, right? And we know that we only need to add this separator after the first index. So what we could do is we could do something like if I equals 0. I can type. We could do something here. And what we could do is we could actually reuse some of this logic here, right? So let separator string equals this, right? So we're doing the same thing, where we're joining with the separator, the spacing, right? And the end line and the start line, right? So we're doing the same thing here, but now we need to make separators equal to an array of these three little lines, basically. So how would we take the length of what we probably want to do is we want to do, because we want to make this the same. Let's just pretend that all of these arrays are the same length, right? We don't have to worry about one of the tables that has 3 and the others have 2. We'll just pretend that each items in the table have 2 items, right? So what we can do here is we can say something along the lines of let separator size equals array 0. How do we repeat a string? And if you don't know the answer to that, please feel free to use Google. Or not repeat a string. How do you how do you create an array of a given length and pre-fill it with something?
It wouldn't be just modifying, like using something like the length operator or dot length, because we're already doing that. I'm not sure. Yeah.
No worries. So there is the ability to do an array.fill.
New to me.
Okay. So we'll do new array of, like, let's say 12, right? So when you do new array, it'll create an array that's blank, right? Not even just undefined. It'll just be like blank. And we'll call this let separators equals this. Try this. Let's see how this works. What didn't it like? Row
Semicolon?
string. Oh, no, I think I broke something. There we go. So you'll notice here that we have a lot of H's, like too many H's, right? So the reason for that is because it's taking an array of 12 and it's filling it full of just these 3 H's. So we needed to change 2 things on line 12. First, we need to change the length from 12 to the size of array 0 index. So what's that saying is that, like, given this array on line 37, take the first index of that array, count the length of it. So there's 2 items here. And then we need to add the dashes, right? So let's change new array 12 to the separator size.
Just the pipes?
Well, so we need the size of array 0, or the length of array 0.
So I'd probably just dot length. I don't know if that would.
That's close. The only thing that'll do, though, is that keep in mind that we're dealing with a 2-dimensional array. We're dealing with an array inside of an array.
Okay.
So we need array 0 index dot length.
Oh, the whole.
Perfect.
Okay, so the separator size dot length.
Yep.
And then got it. Okay.
And then fill, we don't want it to be H, right? That's not what we're looking for. What do we want it to be?
This is for the separators, so I wonder if it needs that.
So we're already doing that join on line 12.
Oh, you're right. You're right.
Right.
Okay.
So we need the actual contents of the the table, basically.
Which is input array.
So keep in mind, like, row array.join would join item and count, right? With the spaces in between. So we need the characters that are here to be able to fill in here. So we would use the dashes instead.
Just, we're talking about that row. Got
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's run it. Hang on. Let me change one thing. Ta-da! We did it. That's it.
Okay.
We did it. Good job. So yeah, this is another one that like particularly dealing with 2-dimensional arrays, like the array 0 is a bit tricky. But we got it done, right? So do you want to work on the last one, or do you want to call it here? Like, what are you feeling?
We're coming up on noon.
Yeah.
I mean, we could take a look at it. I'm gonna bomb out. I can feel it, but I'd like to say at least take a look.
No worries,
take a
man.
stab at it.
All right, let's take a look. If nothing else, we can talk about how it's done. We don't have to actually implement it. We can just talk about how we would do this one.
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
So this one is a validator. Oh, I always the starting code. Hang on, let me go steal some starting code.
Yeah.
We need to change this question a little bit. My library pads list. We'll take a look at okay. So hang on, I need to back up a little bit. There we go. Change the language to JavaScript. So if you take a look at your instructions, there's an instructions tab. What this basically is telling us is that this is like a super, super, super lightweight version of a JavaScript lexer. Kind of a lexer in syntax, parser, a little bit of both. It's not super well-versed either way. But the idea is given a list of openers and a list of closers, so like something like line 6, right, where we have the curly braces and the brackets and the parentheses, we want to make sure that they open and close on each other, right? And we also want to make sure that they open and close on each other in the right order, right? So lines 5, the is valid on line 6 should output true, but 11 and 16 should be false.
Right, yeah.
Right? So there's kind of different ways of approaching this problem.
I have an idea.
Yeah.
It could be wrong, but maybe something with parse int, or actually, no, not parse int. I think didn't we use it earlier for getting the certain character index of a string, something like that. I know there's a method to do that. That's just what I'm thinking. Like,
there's char at, so we could do string.char at, and then like the number, right? What we could also do is strings allow you to do numbers, just like an array, which is kind of weird. So what we could do is we could start off with a for loop, right? So we could do for let I equal 0, I is greater than or less than string.length, I plus plus, and then we could do string I. And this would allow us to iterate through every item in the string, or every character in the string.
Okay.
And we don't have to worry about edge cases where we're dealing with multiple characters or anything. How would you go about validating this basically? The like that they're in the right order and that there's a correct number of them and stuff?
Probably just simple conditional, but that seems that might be like too repetitive. But just I don't know, just a simple like if else, or maybe even like a ternary operator or something.
Mm-hmm. But how would you know what to put in that if else, basically?
Getting the index of that character, which is obviously what the for loop is for.
Mm-hmm.
How to set that up, though, I'm not sure. Yeah.
No worries. So let's say that we do something like this. And I am rushing a bit just because I know that you're at time. We could do, well, I don't like this. We could do something like this, right? Where const bracket chars equals, I'm going to be a bit repetitive here for the sake of simplicity. Right? So we could say something along the lines of if string 1 or if bracket chars dot includes string, and we could say console.log and make character. I misspelled that. I can't spell. There we go. I know how to spell. My job requires me to do a lot of writing. So here, oh, I also misspelled includes. Go figure. So here we would get an IM character for each of these, right? But how do we know if one of them is an opener or a closer? Like, how do we know whether something is opening or closing properly? The two ways that I've thought about this in the past, and one of them is the wrong way, one of them is the right way, and I'll explain why it's the wrong way and the right way. The first thing we could do is say let braces equal 0, let parens equal 0, and let array equal 0, right? Or let brackets zeros. Braces? Yeah, braces are these, sure. So what we could say is we could say if bracket char, or if string I is this, braces dot, or braces plus plus, right? We could do this 3 different times, and we could say if bracket, if paren, and then we could do the exact opposite. We could say if they're closing, okay, minus minus.
Interesting.
And finally,
okay.
at the very end, we could say return braces and plus paren plus bracket equals 0. We could do something like this. We're making sure that every one of them has a closer in some way or another, right? That allows us to be able to make sure, what am I missing here? Wait, what am I missing here? Paren is not, oh, there we go. There we go. So it'll allow us to make sure that each one of these has a closing and an opener, right? And you'll notice that 2 of these are correct, right? We have a true statement, and then we have a false statement. Also, I need to add to social. Someone linked it. We also have a Slack that everyone can join. We talk about we talk about interviews. We talk about coding stuff, even generic coding stuff. Please feel free to join and chat there and let us know how we're doing and stuff. Any questions you have. So you'll notice that we do have the correct number of opening and closing, right? And this is a very rudimentary way of solving it. And if we only had these 2 edge cases, these 2 test cases, we'd assume that we were doing it right. But you'll notice the middle is true when it says false, when we expect to see false. And the reason for that is that there is the correct number here, but this is an opener and it's not followed by a closer. It's followed by a closer of another property or another character, right? So this implementation is not correct for that reason. Instead, I'm going to steal James' solution because James' solution is pretty good. Hang on. Okay. So James' solution, which is our senior engineer that we talked to last week, he did something along this line. So the idea here is that we have a stack. Inside of this stack, we keep a list of the characters that we've seen, right? The opening characters that we've seen. And what we do is every time, so you'll notice that if it does not include a character, we don't worry about it. We ignore it. We continue, right? If we do see it, we push to the character. Oh, wait, I'm missing something. Here, I'm missing this. There we go. So what we're saying is if the character is an opener, right, then we push it to the stack so that we can keep track of what we've seen already. And if we haven't seen, if that's not the case, then we pop the item off the stack at the very top to make sure that it matches. So in this case, we would hit this character and we'd check whether it matches this character. It doesn't, and because of that, we'd fail and early return false, if that makes sense. So we're using pop to mutate. We're using push to mutate. And then at the very end, we just make sure that the stack length equals 0, right? So if we run, we'll see true and false, which is exactly what we're looking for. So the way that this works is, again, it's similar in that we're checking the same number. We're checking to make sure that at the very end, every opening and every closing has a match. But we just make sure that the matches line up correctly rather than just checking the number in general. So, yeah. Well, Derick, I know it's noon. I know you got other stuff to take care of. We really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, I mean, I know this wasn't quite a mock interview, but yeah, I mean, I might have, I didn't quite catch it either. Sounds like I got a little doxed in the comments, but your boy is new, so
yeah, no,
I still wanted to tackle it regardless. But yeah, no, this is cool. This is cool. It's pretty educational. It's cool to see this stuff like hashed out live, you know. So yeah, of course.
And don't sweat it. You're gonna improve as you keep going. And honestly, so I've worked with Derick for the past year or so, and I can firsthand attest how far you've come in that time. You really have come a far way. So you got to give yourself more credit than you're giving yourself right now.
I'm trying.
So don't worry about it. But yeah, we really appreciate you being here, and yeah, I hope everyone else enjoyed the broadcast. Feel free to join our Slack. We have it in our chat. And yeah, we'll see y'all later.
Cool. Yeah, everybody enjoy their weekend.
Yeah, take care.